Mr. Met. I think he's a fantastically named mascot. He's got the baseball head. What do you want? What do you want over there?
No originality, Brad.
Fair enough. All right, Brad. You have had a chance to talk to people about the Paris Accord. The companies have weighed in. The businesses have weighed in. The countries have weighed in. What are the people saying about this?
It's been really interesting looking at just polling numbers over the last few months, because I think we frame this so often as a 50-50 argument. It's not necessarily. A broad majority of Americans are, according to polls from Politico, from Harvard, and here at ABC News, show that a broad majority of Americans support staying in the Paris Climate Accords. This is polls going back in March and even to January. This has consistently shown that only about 30% of Americans think we should withdraw. When you look at just how people feel about climate change, even though President Trump has called it a hoax, and I think we often sort of view it through, either it's real or it's not, and we think of it as this sort of toss-up thing. 65% of Americans think that man-made climate change is real, that humans are directly contributing to it, and we're talking about huge majorities of Democrats, large majorities of independents, and while Republicans are more likely to disagree, it's a much deeper split there. So what that means is the president is, going against that sort of popular opinion, but then again, on the campaign trail, he was very clear. He wanted to rip up the Paris climate deal. He said it was a job killer. He said that all these environmental regulations are overly burdensome, and he was voted into office. So I don't think it was a secret that he said he was planning on withdrawing, and indeed that's what sources say he is leaning towards as he goes into today.
Numbers are really interesting because maybe all these people who want to stay in the Paris Accords don't go to the polls, because many Republicans are out and out hostile to comments about climate change and man-made climate change. So they're not shy about giving their opinion, and yet they keep winning elections.
I was going to say, I think it also might just speak to the idea that people might not necessarily be voting solely on climate change, too, right? That if you're a Republican who believes in man-made climate change, that still has not endeared you, say, to Hillary Clinton. I think that also ends up being part of the identity politics here as well, that you've got a lot of Americans who believe man-made climate change is real, but they still believe in the Republican agenda and in a larger sense, the president's agenda as well. And even when you look at, say, industry, I mean, there are a lot of industry leaders here, including in the energy field, who say that the U.S. should remain a member of the Paris Climate Agreement. You've got Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner and Rex Tillerson all begging the president to stay in, yet he made this promise on the campaign trail. It has proved politically workable for him. He's got people like Steve Bannon and Scott Pruitt at the EPA saying that indeed this will hurt the coal industry, that it'll hurt some of our fossil fuel interests, and it does look like he's going to end up withdrawing at the Rose Garden today.
Even the coal industry wants him to stay in this agreement.
Well, we've seen the National Mining Association be one of the larger groups that has said he should definitely pull out. But outside of that, it's been actually rather difficult to find business leaders, Democrat or Republican, who do want him to leave. One of the reasons is not just because of emissions, right? I mean, there are groups who I think would be fine with not lowering emissions so quickly. The problem is that when you've got 194 other countries who are all making these commitments, who are all part of this treaty, it makes it more difficult to have a seat at the international bargaining table when you come from that one of three countries that's not part of it. Other countries are not going to take your corporation seriously when you're bargaining from this position way outside the norm.
Brad Mielke, did you say 71% of Americans want the president to stay in?
No, I said 31% of Americans want the U.S. to withdraw. That makes 50 or 60% of Americans who want the U.S. to stay in. There's 10%, 20% of Americans who don't really care either way.
Right, yeah. Who care more about Mr. Met than the Paris Climate Accords. Brad Mielke, ABC News correspondent, thanks for checking in.
Hey, thank you.
All right, what is Donald Trump going to do? Well, we're going to check in with Lana Zak in about a half hour from the White House. This is